trying to reconnect. Oh, there it goes. All right.
Oh, fine, sure.
Keep going.
Hi, for anybody that's there, this is Larry, SCA Gilabert, coming to you from my pottery studio tonight. Tonight I'm going to be doing a little demonstration on throwing some forms using some of the clay that I did in the wedging demonstration Tuesday night. Video of that is on my timeline and is public. And going to be going here making some pots. I prefer to throw on bats because you can take them off if you throw something large and leave it on the bat and not deform it. Smaller things can be picked up off of the bat once it's cut loose. This is the 1.25 pound piece that I wedged up Tuesday night. We're going to start with that and see what we come up with. As I use the little tools, I'll talk about them a little bit. If my wheel is a little noisy, sorry, it's 30 plus years old. What I'm doing right now is centering up the clay so it doesn't have any wobbles to it. Wobbly clay doesn't throw well.
And you're also compressing the clay as you're doing that, right?
Right. Sometimes it takes a little more speed. There we go. Slip. This wheel was originally a sit-down wheel. I converted it to a stand-up because it's easier on my back and shoulders. Once you have the clay centered on the wheel in some form of a cake, hockey puck, even a mushroom shape, depends on what you're making. What you want to do is you want to break into the clay down to some depth that's not all the way through to the bottom, and then open up the clay. If you want it, you can take a tool, like a pin tool, and check the depth of how thick your clay is on the bottom. I've got 3/8 to a 1/2 inch of depth here, so it's a good thick bottom. I can actually thin that down a little bit just by pressing in and pulling the clay back out just a little bit more toward the center, or toward the edge of the pot. One of the things I like to do is I use this wooden rib to flatten and compress the bottom and form a nice corner in the bottom of the pot. A little trick that I was taught by Heloise Bergstead, and it has worked very nicely. I don't think I've had an S-cracked pot since she showed me how to do that. S-cracking is when the pot dries and the bottom gets a crack in it because the clay was not compressed. Right now, I coned up the clay to even the thickness of the walls and get it ready for the first full, real pull of forming the pot. Everybody has different ways of throwing. You develop the way that is comfortable for you, your hands, the position you're working in, and the type of pot you're working on. What I do is I come in at the bottom side here, press my fingers in to create a roll, and I begin to pull up by pressing on the outside and the inside at the same time, and the clay moves up and the pot grows in height. I have an air bubble in this clay. I think it's an air bubble. what I just did there was took the pin tool and just punctured the air bubble to work the air out of it, and that disappears as you work in the pot.
We have a question. Why do they call it throwing?
It really goes back to ancient times. I just saw a definition of that recently on somebody else's pottery video that I was watching on YouTube, and I can't remember why. It's the term of working the clay, and it goes back to ancient Old English, Welsh type language. Now I'm going to do another lift. Pulling the clay up. And compressing the top rim. And we have a basic cylindrical form. I'm a little caved in at the sides, but it's better than the first time I threw, which 99% of the people who throw the first time make a bowl. There's my rib. What I'm going to do now is take my rib and use it to compress the clay on the sides, because that's been moved up. It needs to be compressed to give it strength and structure. And I'm thick down here, I can see from the inside of the pot, so I could actually do another pull some of that clay up off the bottom, which I'm going to try to do. A little bit of water for lubrication, moisture. Oh, there's a lot of clay down there. As I'm coming up, I'm actually releasing the pressure because I'm a little thin in the center. So what I'm doing is bringing the clay from the bottom side of the pot up and into this center area where I feel that I pulled a little thin. And if Heloise is watching, yes, I'm going to cut this in half. Grab my sponge on a stick here so I can get the water. For me, it's easier to get the water out of the bottom using a sponge on a stick than trying to reach my hand down and deform what I've got thrown. Just clean it up a little bit. At this point, if I were doing it, I could have expanded the side out, made it kind of bellied. Like that. I can also grab my fingers a little bit, collar it in, make it a little bit narrower to give it some shape, definition, and then with a knife tool, wooden knife, I can come in and do some cleanup work on the bottom of the pot.
Kaylee says this is her kind of tumbler.
Her kind of tumbler?
Yep.
Yeah, this will probably hold somewhere around 18 to 20 ounces when it's done. And then, as a final, if I were throwing this to keep it and use it, take a piece of chamois or plastic to polish and compress the top edge. I also use this time to use the back of my finger to form a little bit of a curve in the lip so it feels comfortable, or curve on the lip of the pot so it feels comfortable when you put it to your mouth.
Afton would like to know what you're making.
This is just a big demonstration cup. It has no handle. At this point, it has to dry a bit before a handle can be put onto it. But it could be a cup, a big beaker, big jar. Could be a vase. Any number of things. Now the fun part. It's going to collapse because it's got some thin spot in it, but I'm going to cut it apart so we can take a look at how even or uneven I made the thickness of the walls. There was still a little bit more clay I could have brought up on a vessel this size. Got a little bit more height out if I wanted. Another way to take care of this is I could trim this off. Once it dries down some, I could take some of this out here, and because of the thickness of the bottom, I could actually carve in and make a foot. That's a base showing how to make kind of a basic form, a cylinder that's been bellied out a little bit, collared in a little at the neck, to give it some shape and form. I always hate cutting a perfectly good pot in half, but it's something you have to do to understand where you're at in your throwing. I'm going to grab a chunk of that marbled clay that I made last night. And we're going to take and throw this. I think I might make a bowl out of this. First thing I'm going to do, dry my hands off a little. Just real quick, kind of put it to a roundish shape from the square that it was. This will be fun. When I center, I push in with my my left hand to hold the clay in place and move it toward the center. And I press down with my right to push it down onto the wheel. And then I'll release my right hand, push in with my left, let it raise up and down a couple times. And then I will bring my hand down over, trying to compress in and get a homogeneous, even movement in the clay. I can feel there's a hard spot or something stiffer in it. There we go, starting to straighten out. And that lump is centered. No, I didn't measure it. I've got probably 2.5 to 3 pounds here. And yes, it all turned brown because of the iron clay that's on it. When it gets done, we will be able to see the different colors in the clay. Again, I'm breaking down into it to open it up. Add a little bit of moisture. I'm going to make this into a bowl, so I'm going to instead of pulling straight across the bottom, I'm going to pull up and let it form kind of a curved bottom that I can work with. Slow my wheel down a little bit, because as we know, anything that's spinning wants to go out. centrifugal force wants to centrifugal. The force wants to make it go sideways. I never can remember if it's one is good and one is not. Good word and bad word. It seems like I'm going backwards, but all I'm doing is I'm bringing the extra on the sides up into the center to control the shape of the clay so it does what I want it to do and not what it wants to do. Because yes, clay is alive and it hates you. Starting to even the thickness of the cone. I try to use as little water as is needed, otherwise it makes a great whopping mess everywhere. I've had it looking like a slaughterhouse scene down here at times because of the amount of water I was using was just too much. And I need to add some water. I don't have quite enough. Yep, we're going to take that chunk off. As you throw, you learn, especially with bowls, how far down and in you can go before the clay will support itself. If you get the bottom too far in and the walls are not thick enough, the bowl will collapse under its own weight. And that's a lot of work to go to waste. So it's one of the practices you do is learn where and how big of a foot you want, and I'm about at that point now. There's some more clay there that I want to pull out. I'm going to pull it from the center out and up the side. Slow my wheel down low. Had a bit of unevenness in the pull, so I'm going to take and trim the top down so it stops wobbling like that, because we don't like bowls that don't wobble evenly or don't have an even rim to them. Words, use words. I have a couple of different ribs that I use for throwing bowls. This is a wooden rib. It's got a couple different shapes that you can use, or parts of those shapes to help form. And with a bowl, a lot of people are more of the opinion that the inside is the more important shape of it. The outside can be decorated and made to look how you want it. And we get a little glimpse of what this is going to look like when it's done. And while I'm working the inside, I'm stretching the bowl to open it up just a little bit, and I think I like that size right there. Take and clean the inside out so I can see what the very bottom of the bowl looks like. Press my rim just a little bit, even it up. I'll go over the inside again with another rib in a minute. Want to do a little cleanup work on the outside. A little metal rib of death. It's called that because this little metal rib can get sharp because you're using an abrasive on an edge, so over time it can get sharp, and if you're not careful with it, it can cut you quite nicely.
Show us your rib of death.
There's the metal rib of death. It's a little stainless steel flexible rib, and we use the ribs on the outside to help form and clean up the exterior of the pots.
Is that metal rib good for the outside of a bowl like this because it's so flexible?
Yeah, there are metal ribs like this. There are plastic ribs too that can do the same thing, but they're softer, so they won't. One, they won't cut you. Two, they allow you to make more complex, tighter turns with them. And I can also use this rib on the inside of the bowl. So we get a little idea of what it's going to look like. I'll be able to clean it up a little bit better when it dries down some. But we're going to have, there's some nice coloration in here. A lot of this will clean up too when I go to trim the bowl, which will be in a couple of days when it dries down. Again, I'm going to clean some of the wet clay off with the foot. Put a little undercut in it. Find my bit of chamois that I've lost. Fortunately, I have a secondary piece. Ah. Slow the wheel down, and then take and cut it loose so it'll help come off.
But this you're going to leave on your bat to dry for a while, right?
Yeah, I can leave this on the bat. Actually, this has got enough strength in it that I could pick it up and move it off the bat if I wanted to, but I prefer to leave them on the bat so that they can dry, and probably tomorrow I could take and take it off, turn it over, let the bottom dry a little bit more, and then trim it on Saturday. So there may be a trimming video on Saturday. I'll make some more stuff because I don't have anything right now that's ready for trim other than this, and we'll do a trimming video. But I think for tonight, that'll give you a good idea of a couple of basic forms: a basic bowl, a basic cylinder that was modified a little bit to belly it out, get a little bit of a belly, and waist it in at the neck. And then that kind of shape can be made, Those can be made however big your clay is, however big you feel like making it, is how big you can make it when you throw it. So, for now, that's all for today. Have a good night.
Wash your hands.
Yeah, oh yes, wash your hands.